March 8th, 2023. Today's time is 5:34. At this time, we would like to call the meeting to order and have a roll call for purposes of a quorum.
Sigifredo Perez, Oscar Buitron,
I'm here.
Osvaldo Guzman,
Here.
Lisa Paul,
Present.
Sylvia Bruni,
Present.
Alfonso de la Garza,
Present.
Dr. James Cortez,
Present.
Adolfo Martinez.
Present.
Do you have a quorum?
We have a quorum.
I said, we're gonna vote for you. That's a good thing.
You don't have any citizens' comments at the moment.
Nobody's online or on the phone or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Okay, item number 3 at this time is the approval of the meeting minutes on February 22nd, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve those meetings? Or minutes, I'm sorry.
The minutes. Yes. I'm motion.
Okay.
I'll second. Oscar.
Okay. Any discussion on on that motion? Okay, everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Item number 4 on the agenda is to appoint a chairperson. Does anybody have a motion to appoint a chairperson?
I move to, that we appoint Adolfo Martinez as the presiding.
And I second that motion.
In perpetuity.
You did a great job, that's good.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Can I say myself, but no one opposed. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, subsection B on item 4 is going to be the presentation of the legal sufficiency, which is, it was reviewed by outside independent counsel, acting as the ethics compliance officer. This is regarding the ethics complaint filed by Patricia G. Soto on or about February 9th, and this was alleging certain violations of City of Laredo Ethics Code, particularly Section 201, titled Conflicts of Interest, and Section 202, titled Unfair Advancement of Private Interest, and matters related thereto.
Mr. Chairperson, for the record, this is Lisa Paul, and I'd like the record to reflect that I'm going to recuse myself from participation or any discussion regarding this item. Even though I am not legally required to do so, there is a familial relationship regarding one of the persons named in the complaint, and to avoid any appearance of impropriety, I'm going to recuse myself, and I would ask that the minutes reflect that I am going to leave chambers during the discussion of this.
Very well. We still have a quorum, I believe. We still have 6 members. And so we can continue with the discussion of the possible actions of the legal sufficiency that will be presented by outside counsel, Ms. Eli Soto.
Good evening, everyone. I did submit a written memorandum explaining what the complaint detailed and the application of the ethics code sections to that complaint. So essentially, the complaint that was raised by Ms. Patricia Soto was that on January 24th, 2023, during a council meeting, Councilman Cigarroa, Melissa, and Alyssa Cigarroa were required to recuse themselves from any discussion on that item. That particular item was regarding the discussion of a healthcare assessment report. I did review the entire city council meeting for January 24th, 2023. What that consulting company did was just evaluate the healthcare needs for Laredo. There weren't any contracts discussed, no bids that were going to be taken. Nothing of economic proposal was brought out in that meeting. It was simply hiring a private consulting company to do a report on the healthcare status and needs in Laredo and present it to the city council for future reference. During that meeting, there was a public comment by Dr. Ricardo Cigarroa, who is the brother-in-law of Councilman Melissa Cigarroa and father to Councilman Alyssa Cigarroa. So they are related within the level of consanguinity and affinity as defined by the Ethics Code. However, the next step in that process, you need to evaluate whether the conflict of interest section was triggered. Conflict of interest only deals with, again, economic interests, business, intangible business interest, or any business ties between the person and the councilman. In this case, yes, they're related, but that lawsuit mentioned by Dr. Ricardo Cigarroa that was contained within the report, it doesn't really raise any economic interest dealing with councilman or himself either. The report did make a very concerted statement to say that it was an allegation that was made. It wasn't discussing the merits of any lawsuit. It clearly doesn't have any legal weight for any court to give it any weight or any substance in any possible lawsuit against Dr. Ricardo Cigarroa. The requirement for a recusal in the Ethics Code is that it does have to involve some type of economic interest to require recusal or a disclosure that you have a conflict of interest because somebody's going to be receiving a monetary benefit or an economic benefit arising out of that report. But in this case, it was just a report to assess future healthcare needs. I did want to note for the Ethics Committee, the City Ethics Code does not have any mention or any definition for when an abstention is required. It's silent. It doesn't say when somebody has to abstain from voting. Recusal requires no participation, no voting. Abstention, you can participate, but you cannot vote on the final account. In this case, the City Ethics Code is completely silent on abstention. So I did look at the Texas Government Code, Local Government Code, and their requirement for an abstention is also revolving around an economic interest. It doesn't raise any issues regarding do they have a familiar relationship, are they related? It has to tie into an economic interest between the city councilman or the elected official and the person making that comment. So in this case, there really wasn't any economic interest that was brought in. The healthcare report, like I mentioned, I did read it. Of consequence, in this case, it was only page 64 that mentioned that lawsuit by Dr. Ricardo Cigarroa. He called it a baseless lawsuit, back and forth regarding the allegations made in that lawsuit, but that's what they were, allegations. Nothing's been proven in court, and certainly whatever comments were made at city council are not gonna be evidence in a trial of law, or in a court of law. So for those reasons, I don't think that they were required to recuse themselves. They did, before the vote was taken about striking that portion of the report, Councilman Melissa Cigarroa did state or request advice from council about whether she should abstain from voting. She was recommended that they abstain from voting because of the family relationship. But like I mentioned, I went back and I looked at the City Ethics Code. It's completely silent on when somebody has to abstain. So they did not vote on it, so their comments that were made were not part of the final decision-making, but they did participate. According to what I've seen in the City Ethics Code and the Texas Local Government Code, they were not required to recuse themselves because there was no economic tie-in to the comments that were made. And abstention also deals with economic interest. There wasn't any such discussion at that city council meeting between the public citizen, Dr. Ricardo Cigarroa, and the two city councilmen that spoke out about that issue in the report. So for those reasons, I don't think it's legally sufficient to trigger something within the city ethics code as drafted now that would require them to either recuse themselves or abstain themselves. They did abstain at the end, but no comments were made during that meeting regarding whether the abstention was tied into an economic interest. The direct comment from the city attorney was that they were being required to abstain because of the family relationship and nothing else other than that. So based on that report, based on my review of the ethics code and my review of the entire meeting and the minutes, I don't think that is a legally sufficient complaint to trigger this committee to do any other action. Yes.
Can you clarify again the difference between recusal and abstention?
Yes, a recusal, for example, if you look at the city ethics code, the recusal requires that if you're going to be discussing any financial interest in somebody that's related to you, within the third degree of consanguinity or the second degree of affinity, meaning brother.
Within the third? Did you say third degree?
Correct. So in this case, it does. They are related within the ethics code provisions because it's brother-in-law, which is second degree, and first degree father-daughter. So clearly they are within the people that are triggered to recuse. But the next step is you have to be recusing yourself from an economic interest. Are you going to do something here or comment something that's going to affect the economic interest of your family member?
What action do you take when you recuse yourself?
You cannot, like Mrs. Paul here,
You
you
cannot
completely
discuss.
withdraw yourself from the participation, from the discussion, and from the voting. And abstention, you can still participate, but you cannot vote. And there is nothing in the Ethics Committee that talks about abstention. I don't know if that's going to be modified at a later date, but there's nothing in the Ethics Committee that discusses abstention. It only discusses recusal. So I went to the local government code, and that only talks about abstaining when there's an economic interest and not just a family relationship.
Okay. At what point, I'm very new, so questions I hope will be.
Yes.
At what point could we ask to meet with you in executive session for additional?
Whenever you feel that you need legal counsel from myself, we can go ahead and call an executive session and I can counsel.
I'd like that, yeah.
Okay. At this time, we will call an executive meeting with outside counsel, and we'll be back to discuss this action on the agenda.
Okay.
It's now 5:58 on the clock. We are back from our executive session and back on discussion of item 4B of today's agenda regarding legal sufficiency relating to the complaint filed by Patricia G. Soto. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or clarity for our outside counsel to answer or to clarify regarding the report we heard earlier on the presentation? Okay, well, at this time, if there is no further discussion, would somebody like to motion whether there is legal sufficiency for the ethics complaint filed by Patricia G. Soto to move forward on the alleged violations of the City of Laredo Ethics Code?
Can we say that based on the advice of counsel, there is no legal sufficiency to proceed? Does that,
That is the advisement on
Yes.
Ms. Soto.
the motion.
is that a motion?
I don't know if that was a motion. Okay.
I would move then that based on the advice of counsel, there does not appear to be legal sufficiency to move forward with a complaint.
I second the motion.
Okay. Motion was second. Is there any other discussion on that motion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Well, next on the agenda would be the adjournment of today's meeting. So would somebody like to present their motion to adjourn?
I so move. I move.
Okay. Anybody second?
I second that motion.
Okay, very well. Anyone, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thought so. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.